Welcome to another episode of the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Jason.
My name is Russ.
My name is Dan.
Cool. Well, let's just go straight ahead into our first segment, which is what have we been playing lately? Russ, you're joining us on the cast for the first time.
Yes, thank you.
What have you been up to game-wise? I think I'm looking at our list right now, and it appears like you and I were in all the same games this week.
Yes, my gaming is done almost exclusively through the Gauntlet. I give soul fealty to the Gauntlet.
We like that. That's very good. You've earned your spot on the podcast. Good job.
I should have worn my T-shirt. Indoctrination is complete.
Yeah, indeed. Not great radio though. The Gauntlet T-shirt.
I know.
It's not bad.
Yeah, I know.
Imagine what it'd be like. But yeah, so I played pretty much all the same games that you guys played. But the ones I'll talk about on Friday after Grimworld, we played Hoity-Toity, which is a kind of a card board game, which was pretty fun.
Yeah, it was good.
So it sounds amazing.
It is
I don't know
amazing.
anything about it, so maybe you should tell me about it, but it sounds amazing.
As long as I have an excuse to say Hoity-Toity again, I'll gladly tell you. But basically, as far as I could gather, it's very story-based. You're trying to gather an antique show to present at the tea ceremony at the end, so you can get the best seat in the house.
Yeah, it's kind of a so it's a German board game, and it is it's based off this game called Adlerverpflichtet. Which
kind of rolls off your tongue.
the well-known game.
Well, say no more, Jason.
The well-known game Adlerverpflichtet, and it's kind of has like an auction mechanic, I guess, and like a set collection auction mechanic. Okay. It's pretty simple as far as board.
Yeah,
games
once you get into it, we had a pretty good pace going. I thought it was good.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it plays really fast, and it's got a lot of little tense like moments. It's one of these things where like you each in the beginning you each have to like, you make secret decisions about which part of the game you're going to, either the auction house or the castle. And then once you get to that location, everybody who chose that location has to secretly choose what they're going to do. And then and a sort of like, rock, paper, scissors type resolution thing happens.
Yeah, you have like cards and everybody plays their card and then you all simultaneously
reveal it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It was a good game. I mean, it was actually it was just kind of like a way to wrap up the night because our Grimworld game ended really early.
Everybody died.
Everybody died. Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. I love a game where everyone dies and you have to stop playing. That's the sign of a good
I would
game.
say it was a TPK, except it wasn't a total party kill because it was all kind of a PvP thing. None of them were together. That's why they all died, right?
Well, and somebody didn't technically die. They were just sucked into a pocket dimension.
That's true. Yes.
Semantics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was, Grimworld was good. I mean, it was just like Dungeon World on a more like operatic scale, essentially.
Definitely earned the name Grim.
Yeah, it was grim. Yeah, lots of death. We counted, over the course of 5 sessions, we killed, what was it, 11?
I think
12, 11 or 12 PCs, so that's pretty good.
Great. Yeah.
I like when you turn through them like that. Otherwise, how do we win? How does a GM win otherwise?
Right.
You don't see that look of sadness on your player's face.
Yeah, except nobody did. That's a bummer. Everybody really loved it when the character died. Like, it was exciting. Yeah, I know. And I was like, oh man, this sucks. They're all enjoying this. I want them to go home sad that the character's dead.
That's the real reason Jason canceled Fridays.
No, it was a lot of fun though. Grimworld was good. I don't know when I want to go back to it because it doesn't actually do I'm just, Dan will hate this, but I'm just a very, very I'm just a real, when it comes to fantasy games, I'm just very, very trad in my sensibilities. I like classic dungeon crawl, get the party together. The thief is unlocking, chests and the fighter's breaking down doors. That's what I like. And Grimworld is maybe a bit too fancy for me. I don't know.
Well,
yeah, I think like the cascading death moves might get a little bit old after.
Yeah, I think so too.
Times.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you'd ever have a chance to even get to know your character at all, right?
No.
Or their fiery implosion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, each of the
Wait, hold up. Let me make a character to die in your character's death explosion.
Exactly. Well, so we've talked about those death moves before, and yeah, they are. All the characters are basically just walking nuclear bombs, right? Yep. And they,
except for the skirmisher.
Yeah, except for the skirmisher who throws the spear real good, which actually had it was very consequential. Yeah. He threw his spear real good at the end, right as he died.
Real good.
Real good. And it caused, that was actually that that caused like basically every other problem for the
open
character.
the window for the
for everybody else to die. Yeah,
all right, so it's a game that can be completely destroyed by somebody throwing a spear real good.
You got it.
Yeah.
Done. So Russ, is there anything else
how
on your
many
list?
copies can I put you down for?
You will like one thing you'll like about Grimworld, Dan. The elves are almost all dead. The dwarves
I am liking that.
The dwarves are almost all dead.
Okay.
Halflings are like murderous warlord tyrants. That's a thing. How you feel about that?
Yeah.
There are crystal people.
Yep.
If you like crystalline
If you
people.
ever wanted to play
Honestly,
Pop
I don't know how I feel about crystal people, so I've never developed like a sense of how I should feel about crystal people. But
all the elves are mostly dead though. Like if you play an elf, you are like one of like the last. Like basically the story is like all the elves are like, why aren't you coming with us? We're leaving this fucked up world. And your guys like, no, I'm not leaving.
no, because elves suck. I'm gonna stay
with you
here
guys
and
for the
die
rest of eternity.
rather than have to sit with more elves.
Nice. That'd been, you were the elf in Grimworld. That's what you would have done.
Yeah.
Like, this is my chance to be free of you motherfuckers. All right. I love it. Russ, what else did you play besides, well, apart from the games that we all shared, I guess. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yes, I pretty much only play video games outside of the Gauntlet because
good.
I think that in the bylaws that's acceptable.
That's allowed, yeah. You are allowed to play video games by yourself outside the auspices of the Gauntlet. Anything outside of that, gaming-wise, is not allowed.
I did have my gaming attorney look it over just to make sure. We're clear, so it's all right. But yeah, I've been playing a lot of XCOM Enemy Within. It's an older game. I was also reading there's a guy who did like one of those speed runs you were talking about the other episode.
Right, yeah.
But in this case, speed run means 50 some hours of, playing insane difficulty. I can't even imagine how that goes down. But it is a fun game for anybody who's never heard of it. You control a squad of people fighting aliens and more than likely dying horribly from plasma guns in the face.
And so the idea on that is that if you lose your characters, they're like gone for good, right?
Yeah, you just hire replacements.
Right.
Some like rookie that doesn't know shit from shit. And,
right. So do
give
you
them
do
a
that,
gun.
or do you like?
Yeah, I play on. No, I play it on Iron Man mode. That's really the best way to experience the real XCOM.
Right.
It's not real XCOM until you're crying because your whole squad got wiped out because you exposed one guy. The rest of them panicked and shot each other. So.
All right. Well, I played it and I just reloaded if I lost dudes.
Yeah, that's acceptable. if you care about like the plot and we want to see the CGI stuff.
Right, exactly.
That's how Dan plays games. Can we just say that? I mean, like,
yeah.
like Dan.
That's right. Easy mode, right?
Dan is. You know how like what's his name? Marshawn Lynch is beast mode.
Yeah.
Dan's very topical since the Super Bowl just happened, right? Dan's nickname is Easy Mode.
Nice.
Easy Mode. You like that? Easy Mode.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, is that
good?
Cool. All right. Well, so I guess we'll move on to my list then. The only thing, so I played Hoity-Toity as well, and also Mountain Witch and this other game called Witch, which we're going to talk about both of those, and Grimworld. The only other thing I wanted to mention that I did this week, two of our members, who are married, Cheryl and Jeff, they had me over for dinner. Cheryl made a lovely Indian dinner. It was wonderful. And we got to play, some of Jeff's old board games. When I say old board games, I mean very old board games. We played two different games. One is called Mystic Wood, and the other is called Dragon Master. And both were published in like 1980, I think, or maybe 1981. One of them was 1980 and one was 1981. Both definitely a product of their time, in terms of like they don't have the benefit of like 40 years of mechanical development, right? Or 30 plus years. But fun. Mystic Wood was kind of this, so basically Mystic Wood was this game where each of us was a knight, and we each had like a mission, and we go out into the Mystic Wood, and we like have encounters with sorceresses and things like that.
Do you share the mission, or each knight?
No, you each have a different
separate
mission. Yeah, you each got a different one, and so you're just kind of traipsing around the Mystic Wood, trying to solve you're trying to complete your mission and having encounters and stuff. Pretty simple game in terms of like the gameplay and stuff. Like not really. It's definitely a product of its time, right? Like very, very simple gameplay. But something I thought was really interesting about it was you can see like a lot of games that like, people enjoy nowadays, particularly like Fantasy Flight type games, like sort of like fantasy based, adventure games, that kind of thing. A lot of those games have some of Mystic Wood's DNA in it, right?
Oh.
Like, there are a lot of things that are going, that Mystic Wood did that I have to imagine was pretty innovative for its time, right? So for one of the things you do is, games where there's a bunch of tiles like flipped over, like upside down, and when you're exploring, you flip the tile over to see what it is. You kind of randomly distribute it, and you gradually
simulate the exploration.
You gradually reveal the map. Well, Mystic Wood does that. The idea that each of the players has a different goal, I think was probably somewhat unique at that time, or at least a new thing. I have to imagine.
So it's competitive. You're trying to be the first one.
It's competitive to complete your goal. Yeah. And then just this very, very simple, sort of proto, you think of games like Hero Quest or, later games that came like Dungeon or whatever, where it's all about just moving around the board and having encounters, it's very much, it was like that, but in a very, very, kind of simplistic way. That was still fun. We had a good time. And then the other game that was actually pretty good on the merits was called Dragon Master. It was just a trick-taking game based off of this other game called Coup-d'etat. It was just a skin of Coup-d'etat. It was, I guess, the way Jeff described it to me is, well, so kind of like how, Love Letter is reskinned with all kinds of licenses now, they take Love Letter.
Is it really?
Oh yeah. Oh gosh. There's 20 different licensed versions of Love Letter.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Cause it's easy to do, right?
Right. All you need is 8 pieces of art.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So apparently the way Jeff described it, this game Coup-d'etat was a similar situation, right? At that time, people were just reskinning Coup-d'etat.
Oh, yeah.
And Dragon Master was one of them, right? But it had some really nice art, really kind of cool,
was that the one with the supple buttocks? With
no, that was Jeff's, some of Jeff's role-playing games, which, by the way, all role-playing games from the early, late 70s, early 80s, incredibly homoerotic.
Yes.
I mean, insanely homoerotic. Yeah. But it was cool. It was fun stuff. And it was just kind of a little, it's just a trick-taking game, but, and the theme didn't really match what you were doing at all. But I don't think it probably matches a coup d'etat either, but,
just shout out, I'm a dragon during the middle of it.
No, yeah. I'm the master of the dragons. I'm the master of the dragons. No, you do have to read the story in the beginning. That was fun.
And then promptly forget about it. So
right.
Yeah. But it was a good time. It was kind of fun to have this, sort of little retro game night. Especially, and these are games I'd never even heard of, It's not like we went to Jeff's house and played First Ed D&D, right? It was really obscure shit. He's got lots of games I'd never heard of before I met Jeff, right? So that's pretty cool. But yeah, so Dan, what's on your list?
I had a very themed week, so I played 2 witch-themed games.
Witch-themed games, yes.
So,
witch game?
Exactly.
Oh boy, Russ.
We played.
That's getting edited out.
So we continued our Mountain Witch campaign, which all 3 of us were involved in.
That's true.
Yes.
So let's talk about that first, probably.
I think
is there much to say about it? What do you think about it, Russ?
I think it's developed well since the last game. I think the decision to not have the secret was really helpful in making it flow better.
I agree completely. Yeah. The game really took off for me when we kind of, I made a decision earlier in the day to basically ask you all straight up, what was your dark fate? What is your dark fate? What does it mean? Because I have no idea what to do with this game. Right. So everyone told me and it was great. It worked out really, really well. It kind of just had this, it started to do exactly what was promised on the box, which is it felt like there was a lot of tension between the Ronin.
Right.
The Dark Fates were, I was able to put you guys in situations that created tension between the characters, right? And everyone was doing a really good job of playing it honestly too. I think you guys could have all just avoided the tension and avoided the conflict, but you did not. Everyone kind of went for it pretty hard and, it was good. I mean, and the trust mechanic started to really come alive in a better way. It was great. I think it was, the first session was definitely a hint of how it was supposed to go, and the second session totally delivered. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So one of my concerns was that I thought that the Vengeance Dark Secret was going to be super boring.
Yeah.
But actually now that it's kind of on the table and both me and the other player who are involved know about it.
Right.
I think it's actually working out really interestingly.
It is.
Now it's just this tension that's always there between our characters, but nothing has happened yet, but we each know that, eventually one of us is going to kill the other.
Yeah, well, you guys are playing it well too, because it's because you've both acknowledged that there's this problem, and it's come up in the fiction. It's not, it's not just a meta thing,
right? Yeah,
it's in the fiction. Your characters both know about each other's bullshit, right?
Right?
Yeah. They've had a few confrontations, right? Which were pretty good.
Yeah, they were nice, good, just real. You could see the I could see these characters on screen, having it out, but still not for whatever, because they can't really, not just saying, well, fuck you, I'm leaving,
Right.
Not just leaving
still
the party.
Committed to the mission.
Still committed to the mission and still committed to accomplishing, if for no other reason, to watch each other, right?
Right, yeah.
And that was, I thought that was really nice. It came out pretty well.
And it's got that kind of dumb sort of like vibe to it now, where it's like, well, we've got to get through this because I'm going to be the one to kill you, right?
Exactly, yeah. Well, to switch it up a little bit with Mountain Witch, like the conversation, what did you guys think of... Derek is also in that game, and he brought up the fact that like the game has like sort of like parallel death spiral tracks. What do you guys think of that? Because he experienced...
Yeah, he's in it pretty bad.
Yeah, he experienced one of those death spirals pretty badly, and Kristen's getting the other one, right?
Yeah.
So, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, so just to explain a little bit.
Sure.
When you roll badly, you can get penalized with like minuses to your future rolls, and so those can start to stack up, and obviously you're going to lose more conflicts if you have more minuses, and so you can get to the point where you just mechanically... It's really difficult to win conflict.
Yeah, so there's a mechanic called dueling where it's just one person against one person with no outside assistance, and you roll the dice multiple times for that.
Right.
So he's getting a -2 to every single roll. So he was getting like a cumulative -6.
Yeah.
Which that is almost insurmountable.
He cannot duel. I mean, he's essentially, because if it'll be a duel to his death, right? Like,
right.
Just hope you get super lucky on the first roll.
Right. Well, and you can't help people to duel either.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right?
But I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense in the fiction, right? Like, if you're super fucked up, it's probably a bad idea to get into a duel with somebody.
Right.
So, and mechanically, you can still help other people.
True. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And also, the sort of like safety valve that the game has built in, which is really good, by the way. It's so good. You can, if someone like, Derek's character is currently like wounded, he's got that -2 on each of his die rolls. But at any point, one of you guys can spend one of your trust to basically just make the outcome of his conflict good for him. Right.
And like he can do the same thing to other characters.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So the game's got this nice, like, little, like, I guess, like, safety valve that prevents it from being like a complete washout for one character.
As long as everybody trusts each other.
As long as there's trust between the characters. Yeah. It's really good. So the other death spiral thing that he identified was the
so the other one is is based on trust, where if you become the character who is most untrusted,
who's Kristen's character currently,
no one gives you any power, right? Because it's based, your power to like shape the narrative is based on how much other characters trust you. And so if you don't have trust from the other characters, you can't actually like even shape the narrative to like redeem yourself.
Right. Yeah. It makes it real hard. Yeah. Well, at least mechanically, you have to just do it like purely in the fiction, right?
Right.
Like, you don't get a chance to like, no.
I don't know. Could be problems.
I don't think so. I think to me so far,
I think there's enough there to like counterbalance it.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's I don't think it's going to be a problem. I mean, I'm sure Derek felt the sting of it a little bit because his character was so
right.
But the cool thing is though, the cool thing about it though was his character had probably the most interesting story of anybody's character that week too, right?
Yeah,
right. It was memorable for sure, right? Because he was the one who was suffering for his cause, right? Like
and how.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the details, but I think like everyone's story was pretty cool, but like his felt very, very like I felt sorry for his character.
Yeah.
I felt like, wow, if this was in the movie, I'd feel really bad for this guy, right? Because his motives are probably the most pure of anybody's, right? He's trying to save his lady love, and it's just like, and he's just getting fucked over left and right, and but in a fictionally satisfying way.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
Yeah, and I think he, and he knows it too. I mean, I think he's happy with how it's progressing, but he was clearly like feeling the sting of that, right?
Yeah.
So.
And it does suck to like mechanically have aspects of the game that you can't engage with anymore, right? So.
Yeah, we'll see. We got one more session. I think it's all going to be fine because I think we're about to discover like the importance of. I think we're really going to discover the importance of like the trust mechanic next session, right? It's gonna get nailed home because you're gonna have to face the Mountain Witch, and by that point you might all have no trust in each other. In which case you can't
SOL.
win,
right?
You're SOL. Yeah. So cool. What else?
So the other game that we played was called Witch: The Road to Lindisfarne.
Not to be confused with Mountain Witch, the game we just talked about.
Right, yes. Right. Completely separate game,
Mountain
also
Witch,
about a witch.
The Road to the Mountain Witch.
Lindisfarne, The Road to the Mountain Witch.
Right, yes. So anyway, Witch: The Road to Lindisfarne it's a GM-less game. It's very like tightly focused on telling one particular story, which we've talked about in the past as being a good thing.
Be a good future
some
topic,
cases.
I think. Yeah.
But the general idea is it's during medieval England times, and the Black Plague is on, and a young girl has been identified as a witch who is, of course, causing the Black Plague, and so she needs to be brought to this holy island and burned alive to make the plague go away.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, obviously. So it's GM-less. All of the players are characters on the journey. One of the players is the witch. And it's very structured in that, like, there's 4 acts. And in Act 1, you're always, like, in the city preparing to leave. In Act 2, you're always in the Hangman's Wood or whatever. And it kind of goes around and everybody gets their scenes. And the witch kind of has separate roles. In the beginning, the witch player decides if the witch is actually guilty of witchcraft or not, or is innocent. And then
knowingly or not, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then, like, they're just kind of stuck in a cage the whole time. So they do slightly different scenes. But, in general, like, you kind of go through these set acts. And at the end, like, you always get to the holy city where you're going to burn the witch. And it's up to everyone to decide if they're going to take part in the ritual that burns the witch or not. And
either decisively take action against burning the witch or just kind of
go with the flow. Yeah.
Right.
Like
yeah.
the match.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you pussyfoot it, the witch is dead, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't get.
Which is what happened in our game. I think some people were trying to like sneak in a last minute escape, and it did not
mechanically
available.
It does not work. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Like, if you want to free the witch,
you have to like grab her off the stake. And,
right.
Like,
you need to be like,
run for it.
Yeah. You can't do any like, maybe I don't tie her ropes quite tight enough.
Right. Yeah.
Because then the next person comes along and is like, I'm lighting the pyre.
So, she's struggling against her bonds and burning horribly.
Right. Yeah. Because the witch doesn't get to do anything, right?
Yeah. When it gets to your section, you have to read.
Yeah.
Right.
It all depends on the
alive.
charity of her Gowlers or whatever. Well, so what do we think?
Right. So that's what I was going to ask. Is now we've got the premise out of the way.
Sure.
What was
it's a great
impression
premise. I love it as
Yeah.
far as the premises for games go. Russ, what are your thoughts?
I think on the premise that it was trying to deliver, it kind of fell short a little bit. For me, I've played Monsager 1244, which has a lot of carryover elements. So I enjoyed kind of the characters we were exploring, but I think there was like a fairly significant disconnect between like what we were doing with our characters and what the witch and everything else that was supposed to be happening.
I agree, completely. I love the premise of the game. I want to either try it again or I want to experience it again because I want to experience it the way it's sold, on the box, right? I want that, like, I want to have, like, in my mind, I imagine the game going a certain way and ours did not, unfortunately. I mean, and I think part of the problem for me, I was the witch player. The witch character sheet has this great big list of like things that are like, oh, if you're the witch player, do this, and oh, try to do this, and oh, be sure you do this. But the witch the witch has very, very little like narrative power. Like there's not many opportunities for the witch to actually have like directorial power over a scene. She gets just as many, she gets to frame just as many scenes as the other 5 guys. And the problem is like, I think the thing we kept running into, and it could just be inexperience with the game, I don't know, but the thing we kept running into is we were all supposed to be, like, all these characters are supposed to be making a value judgment about the witch at some point, right? But a lot of the scenes that were getting framed didn't even involve the witch often, right? Like the witch was not even in the scene. As
a background.
Yeah. And so, I felt as the witch, I did not feel like I was able to, because, the witch is supposed to like turn the characters against each other and try to like curry favor with other characters, but I just didn't feel like I had enough opportunities to do it.
I think it hurt a lot since the witch is, according to the rules, is supposed to set the scenes first.
That's weird.
Whereas you should be like reacting to what the other people
exactly.
set
Yeah. So basically one of your 4 scenes that you get to frame as the witch is wasted essentially because you've got nothing to work with. And then the game does that odd thing, that super, super weird thing that I still think is so weird and I can't get over. I'd love to talk to the designer about why they made this decision. But each of the characters that is not the witch is supposed to make like a confession about like what their dark secret is or whatever, a la kind of like Mountain Witch, honestly.
Right.
But they do it like halfway through the game. And so by the time you learn like what makes these characters interesting, the game is half over already.
Yeah.
The witch only has 2 more chances to frame scenes to work those things in. And,
well, then it was awkward too because as the witch, regardless of whether you're practicing witchcraft, you're supposed to know. Secrets.
Yeah,
so
that was totally weird. Yeah, like these confessions are done like in a meta way, right? It's the player like making the confession for the character. The characters don't necessarily know it about each other, except the witch knows somehow.
Right.
And that's weird. Like, Exactly. And if you're innocent, if you like immediately show like psychic powers about why you know this about them, your ass is going to the stake, right? So I don't know. Honestly, the more I think about it, I think Witch, the Road to Lindisfarne could have used a little bit more Mountain Witch in it in some ways, like the way, because you kind of have you have kind of similar goals in the Mountain Witch, which is, there's a journey, right? There's a journey going on. Yep. And each of the characters has a dark secret.
Right.
And, the GM player, is supposed to help create tension and conflict between the characters. But the difference is, in the Mountain Witch, you have all the information you need, right?
And also, you're actually a GM.
And you're a GM, exactly. Well, and I think that's what it is, right? I think the Witch character needs to be more of a GM type role. Yeah. But
So, well, but that said, just to play devil's advocate
Please do. Just like the Witch.
Exactly.
Burn him!
Burn you!
So, I thought that, in a lot of ways, like, I'm right there with you guys. I thought that, like, it fell flat in a lot of ways, but I did think the last scene was super powerful, where everyone is standing around and, like, deciding whether they're going to do their thing, like, do their part to kill the witch or not. And, like, especially with even out of character, we don't know if the witch is innocent or guilty. Right. And, like, so we've spent, like, however many hours kind of going through this journey and, like, talking about what's going on with each other and all of that. Right. But then, like, it all comes down to whether, like, that player is going to read their section in the rules.
Right,
and, like, or if they're actually going to not and, see where it goes.
But I imagine it being very powerful. I mean, I'm glad you took that away from it. And I think maybe the reason why that didn't resonate with me so much is because I don't think I had a real good, clear grasp on, like, what was happening then mechanically. Right? Yeah.
Like, and as the witch, like, that scene probably isn't super interesting for you.
Because you don't get to do anything as the witch. Yeah, like the rest of the game, you have no power as the witch.
Right. It's explicitly, like, the witch character is bound and gagged and cannot speak during the scene. Like,
I mean, I think part of the problem is I had already, like, kind of checked out a little bit by the time I got to that part, and so I wasn't really letting that
just resigned.
Yeah, I mean, resigned wasn't the right word, but I was definitely already, like piecing together my, like, thoughts on why I thought the game fell flat a little bit. I can see how that scene would be very powerful, though. Like, it like, especially, but I feel like it really, for me, it needed, like, the context of, like, the journey being more satisfying. I think that was the problem. That was basically what I ran into.
Yeah, I think it could have been even more emotional.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it would have been even more powerful, right?
Probably.
Like, I mean, yeah.
Right.
I mean,
regardless, I still think that, like, that was a really good, like, that was enough of a payoff to me to make it worthwhile.
Well, that's good. So. I mean, well, Dan, I'm glad that worked out for you.
Me too. Yeah. I enjoyed it.
There were, no, I'm being facetious, but, like, I mean, I'm not picking on you, but there were some moments at the end where I could feel the game, like, getting to where it needed to get, right? Like, but it just happened a little too late for me, right? I could see the glimmers of, like, what this game could be. And even in the end part too, that sequence that you liked, like, I could see, like, I saw the embers of, like, a really, really cool experience, I don't know. That's why I think that I actually wouldn't mind playing it again, rules as written, because I think I would play it differently.
Yeah,
for sure. Like, I think I would definitely play it. I think we all would have, right?
Yeah. One thing I noticed in the rules after the fact was that it makes mention, like, if you feel like your character has made their decision, as a player, you're supposed to look at reasons why they would change their mind. So it's kind of, like, also up to you a little bit to push that doubt into the game.
Push it into the game, right? Yeah.
I think
no, I mean, I gather Jan was trying to do it. No one else tried to do it. I didn't get the impression that anyone was really trying to, like, cause I needed a bone as the witch. I really did. Like, I was not, and I didn't get any. And, there were a couple of times when I just felt like I'd run into this wall of, like, well, so it kind of worked out in our story that all these guys thought they were going to get some kind of, like, religious absolution for all their sins, and they all seemed to believe it really strongly.
Right.
And
which is something that was established in, like, the first scene. That's not in the rules.
Okay, that's
something
that's
that was
important.
established in the first scene, and I think that's where our game went off the rails.
That might have been where our game went off the rails,
like, inject too much history into the.
Yeah, that might have been where the game went off the rails, because because every time as the witch, I tried to, like, have a conversation with the character or try to, like, sow doubt. All I got back was, well, I'm going to be absolved. So
Right.
it's fine.
Yeah, like you accused several of the characters
Like,
of like heinous crimes.
Yeah, I
and
know, yeah.
everyone was like, whatever. Like,
absolved,
shut
whatever.
up, witch.
Yeah. Shut up, witch. As soon as I burn you, I'm good.
Right.
I'm
I'll
gold.
poke you in your cage. Shut up.
Yeah, so I just felt really, really powerless in that game as the witch. And I think a really easy fix for that game is letting the witch frame all the scenes.
Yeah.
I really think that's the key, right? Because then, like, even if the witch is not even in many of the scenes, just the act of the witch player framing the scenes helps, like, create that conflict between the characters, right? And that's important.
Yeah, like dig at the friction points.
Find the friction points and really, really go after them. I'm it's a little disappointing because I wanted to love it a lot, and I think I still can love it a lot. I just need to experience it one more time, I guess. I don't know.
All right. So Jason advocating more GMs in game.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, or as an alternative, another thing that would have helped Witch is if it was going to be a GM-less game, it should have done a better job of establishing, like, relationship webs between the characters in the beginning.
Right.
It did a very poor job of it. Like, it like Fiasco works because it does that, like, really nice setup in the beginning where you, like, immediately connect up all the characters and everyone knows where everyone stands. That did not happen in Witch. Like I said, the dark secrets don't get revealed till halfway through the game. And before that, you just have this list of, like, these, like, vague questions that you're supposed to, like, push towards answering.
Yeah, so it's possible to not even know the dark secret until you, like, pull it out your ass halfway through the game.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
that was happening.
Right, yeah. I mean, there was almost nothing, like, tying those characters together at all, like, in the beginning.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
practically nothing. And so,
Very
if it was
little,
going to be a GM-less game, it needed to do more of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And one other thing that I think it could use is some sort of mechanics to resolve conflicts.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are none.
Yeah.
And if you have a game that, like, doesn't give you any way to, like, resolve tension, I think there's a natural inclination not to create tension.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so everybody just kind of goes along with it, right? Because how do you even decide? If
Well, there's like
somebody
this
doesn't?
core issue too that is like a really heated emotional, like burn the witch or not burn the witch. And like if you have a conflict, you're supposed to like talk about it and like
Right.
hash it out amongst yourselves. So,
Right,
like,
yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like that is not the best way to.
Yeah, no, it needs
Deal
some
with
sort of
that.
mechanic
To
for
cause,
like
yeah,
for
yeah.
taking decisive action.
Do you know, is there anything else we want to talk? Is that it for our game?
I'm good for
Awesome,
Yeah,
cool.
for
Well,
those.
let's
That
take a little
works.
quick break and then we'll go to Giving Me Life.
all right.
So our next segment is Giving Me Life. So I'm going to go first because I'm looking at the list of our notes of what is giving us life, and mine's really dumb. So I'm going to go, I don't want to follow you guys. So I'm going to go first.
So that's good. Always like project confidence.
Yeah,
That's it.
No.
Way
Well,
to fall
okay.
on the sword, Jason.
I've never been accused of not projecting confidence. That's interesting. So the thing that's giving me the life this week, and really for the past few weeks, and will continue to give me life for the next few weeks, is anticipating things that are coming out soon. We're in a point in the year, like right around February, March, where lots of cool shit that's been promised, like last fall, is coming out soon, and I'm getting really excited. So the three things that I kind of took note of were I'm very, very excited about Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Right.
incredibly excited about RuPaul's Drag Race Season 7, which is the best show on TV, one of the best shows on
Pretty
TV.
good. Pretty good.
Have you watched
Yeah,
it?
I
It's
like
good.
it,
It's
yeah.
good. Yeah, it's such a good show.
I
And-
was so excited when I saw that on the list, and I was like, I can't believe Jason's about to talk about drag racing.
And then, have you watched
Drift to the
it?
turn.
No,
Oh, okay, we
I
should. It's
thought
great.
you were talking about like cars that go
No,
really fast all of a sudden. And I was like,
no.
This is a whole other facet of
No,
Jason's
no, it's
personality
not.
that never
Racing
existed.
in between games.
No, it's just regular, simple, old drag queen loving Jason.
I thought this was going to be your dark confession that you're secretly into like
Motorhead.
drag racing and NASCAR.
No, drag. So Game of Thrones, Drag Race, and then Mortal Kombat 10 or X. I guess I was about to say
X,
10. I
that's
think it's
how you
X.
pronounce
You're supposed to
it,
pronounce it
yeah.
X. Mortal Kombat X, the newest Mortal Kombat. So I watch the trailers, every little new piece of like promotional info that comes out. I have to go like devour it. Like I want to see it all, right? And just that like mounting anticipation, like, is totally giving me life. RuPaul's Drag Race, for listeners, I'm sure I have to imagine there's not the Venn diagram of Drag Race watchers and role players is probably not much interlap there, right? Interlap? That's not a thing, is it?
Amongst slap.
Overlap.
Probably more.
Between lap.
Between lap. I imagine there's not much. And so let me tell you, that show is so good. It is hilarious. It is campy. It's fun. There's a lot of artistry that goes into it.
Yeah.
Very, very good show. Start with season 3 if you're going to start it anew. Season 1 and 2 are a little it's still very much trying to find its legs.
I'm impressed that they have had 7 seasons of that.
It's good.
So, I mean, clearly there's something
pretty
there.
popular,
Yeah.
It's become a pretty popular show. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's a great show. And then Game of Thrones, of course, obviously, Mortal Kombat X. I want to watch all the fatalities. I want to see all the gruesome shit. I'm getting really pumped. I think we're gonna have a mandatory fun club, like expressly just to play Mortal Kombat X. So that's exciting.
Tournament.
Yeah, anticipating things is giving me life. My horrible consumerist giving me life. Now, why don't you guys talk about the cool stuff giving you life? Whoever wants to go next, Russ.
Some kind of bullshit, I guess. I know what's giving me life this week is Gorging on the Apocalypse.
Gorging on the Apocalypse.
Yes. It comes from a section of Vincent Baker's Apocalypse World book. It's one of the GM kind of principles that you're supposed to follow, is barfing forth the apocalypse.
Barf forth apocalyptica, I think is exactly how it goes. Yeah. Barf forth apocalyptica.
Very evocative description.
But you have to gorge on it first.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah, you gotta have something to spew all over your players.
Exactly. The barf.
You can't be just dry heaving on your players. That's ridiculous.
Dry heave the apocalyptica. It's not as evocative, is it?
Yeah.
Or it is evocative. It's just not.
It's not much fun for anybody, really.
Yeah. Just a little awkward.
Yeah. But so I've been gorging. I'm trying to take on apocalyptic, settings and descriptions. So I'm reading books.
Totally overrated, by the way.
Yeah,
the reading of books.
If you can't find the cliff notes, I just kind of skim through it. Really.
Just go watch Mad Max.
Yeah, that's what they invented Wikipedia for, right?
Exactly, right, yeah.
I don't have time to read all these words. Shit.
Well, so what kind of stuff you've been doing? Just reading books and what else?
Yeah, I was reading books. I watched, trying to watch anime. Trying is the keyword. Just can't really do it.
That's dangerous work.
Edit that out. I don't want to start getting death threats.
I think the overlap in the Venn diagram between role-playing game
and anime.
I think that's more of a superimposition.
Right?
And much larger. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I edit that part out. And then also, just kind of going back to, I was kind of looking at the original Fallout game.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to play it because that's a long ass game, but
just
kind of like getting a feel for the world and like the creatures and the scarcities. Yeah.
Put it on easy. That's what
it's a good way to do
plays
it.
itself. Really. Yeah. Basically.
Oh, can I just say, there's this really funny thing, digression. Someone like posted this thing where it's like, you have completed, like, it was something like, you have completed life, heterosexual white male. Would you like to try a harder mode? Like you've completed the tutorial. Would you like to try a harder mode? Oh, that's kind of funny. But,
that is kind of funny.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
you got your cis male badge.
Yeah, exactly. The achievement.
Yes.
Bing.
Cool. But yeah, so that's giving me life just because I'm really enjoying, having all this apocalyptic imagery shoved into my brain.
Thinking about the end of the world,
basically.
Giving you life.
Yeah.
Well, just so
you guys are all welcome in my bunker when it happens.
Exactly. I know some people in the gauntlet who would happily join you. So listeners know we're going to be running 2 games of Apocalypse World, and I'm running one table. You're running another table. Your table's already going to be better than mine because I haven't done shit to gorge on the apocalypse.
Well, that doesn't necessily mean anything.
I'm just going to sit down and be like, there are dogs that have 3 eyes. They're mutants.
They want to fuck your leg.
It's because of the apocalypse. Go. That's it. Awesome. Dan, what's giving you life?
So what's giving me life is strangely sad advertisements, I think. So
is this from the Super Bowl? It's from the Super Bowl, right?
It is from the Super Bowl. So predominantly from the Super Bowl. So just advertisements that feature dead children and like domestic abuse and just horrible things, but like just smashed into the Super Bowl, and just the weird clash between those two things is kind of amazing.
That's what I want to watch when I'm trying to put away a thing of French onion dip. That's all I know.
Right, exactly.
I want to watch a commercial about dead kids.
Right, like the perfect lead-in to Katy Perry grinding on a palm tree is
a cartoon palm tree.
Is an advertisement about dead children.
Right, yeah. Or like for domestic violence. There's like that really sad DV one. I was like, oh god.
Yeah. And so I feel like I don't know. I just feel like everybody's trying a little too hard or not hard enough. I'm not entirely sure what the issue is. I'm not an ad man.
Did they send like a memo to the advertisers like, this year for the Super Bowl we want depressing as shit advertising?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Like, is that a reflection of culture? Is it where like they're like, I don't know, the world sucks, man. Let's just do dead kids for ads.
I've got some insight. I just had a flash of insight why this is. I think it's because Gen X is now in a position to be making these calls. Yeah.
So the edgy Gen Xers.
Gen Xers have finally made it to the boardroom and they're doing this shit. That's what it is.
They're just as disaffected as they always have been. Yeah. But so anyway, Super Bowl advertisements, and then just today on my way home from work, I always pass a fertility clinic, which has a giant, like, absurdly large mechanical, like, electrical billboard that they put these signs on. And I'm not entirely sure how this works. Like, if they have an advertising guy just full time on staff, but they just constantly update this thing with, like, weird seasonal fertility messages. So, we're taping this on Groundhog Day, and coming home today, there was a picture of, like, the world's saddest clip art groundhog with, like, escape the shadow of infertility, like scrolling down the side of the sign, right?
Grim.
It is, right? But I don't know, but
escape
I guess
the shadow of infertility. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Wow. So essentially,
weird.
You're getting life from other people's infertility.
Yeah, I guess so.
You are gaining life from the inability of other people to give life. Pretty good.
Full circle.
I like it. Cool. Well, let's move on to the next segment.
Anyways.
So for our topic today, we thought we'd discuss alternative or unusual, atypical methods of conflict resolution. So, we're all accustomed to using dice, and, either polyhedral dice or pools of D6s or whatever, to solve problems in games, to solve conflicts. And, so we thought it'd be interesting to talk about, like, why you might not want to do dice. And I think that a really great question to ask in this discussion is why, if dice are working well, and they do work well.
Yeah.
Why
industry standard.
Why have any other why would you want anything but dice if dice are working so well? Why muddy the waters, so to speak? Why complicate things?
So you can sell your individualized little tokens.
That's true. Yeah. Fantasy Flight would never make any money if they didn't have a special thing to sell. Yeah.
That's true.
Okay. Well, so Dan, what are your thoughts? Why not just dice?
All right. So, I think there's kind of two main, reasons why, or two main ways to get around, like, using dice, right?
Okay.
And, so I think you can substitute something else in.
Sure.
And, I mean, there's reasons you would do that aside from, naked capitalism.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of games would use playing cards or something.
Sure, yeah.
Something else that everyone just has lying around, right?
Right, yeah.
Or, you could just remove randomness entirely. And there are plenty of systems that do that too.
Right, yeah. Particularly, in story games especially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Okay, so, that still doesn't answer the question of, like, why not dice?
So
why not just dice?
So because the dice
what might you want to accomplish?
Right, so the dice aren't doing it for you for a particular reason, right? So,
right, yeah.
So in the case of a lot of the games that use playing cards, I think the main reason for doing that is because dice, you kind of have a limited range, right? And so if you sub in playing cards, all of a sudden, like, your range goes from basically 1 to 52.
Oh, true, yeah.
And you don't have ties or anything like that you can worry about, like, as long as you have some way of ranking suits.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
You don't have ties or anything, so you have a much broader range of possible results.
Okay, yeah.
So something like the Final Girl, I think, does that really well. I think the Final Girl would suck if you use dice.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking about that on the way over actually, and but I never came to a reason why that would be the case. I intuit that you're correct, that I think Final Girl would suck with dice, but why would it suck with dice?
Well, I never
quite landed on why.
So one thing is that if you were using dice, it would be a lot harder for somebody to, like, slide another card in, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so another thing that, like, the Final Girl does is you have a hand of cards and you're deciding when to play them. So you're kind of holding on to your possible, like, quote, die rolls, right?
So let's give the listeners some context. So in the Final Girl, we've talked about it in the past, but essentially it's a horror movie game. And one of the things that you can do in the game is, so whenever you're being targeted by the killer, to determine whether the killer kills your character or not, other players can either help you or harm you depending on the type of relationship they've established with you, right?
Right.
So you're saying that, like, if it came down to a die roll between the killer and myself as the player, it wouldn't be as salient if the helping player just slid another die over to me?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because you would be increasing their chances, but with the cards you guarantee either.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
I mean,
true.
a screw or a help.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a good point. Yeah. So, well, we should probably explain that too. The 3 types of relationships that you can form in the Final Girl are either friendship, rivalry, or screwing, right?
I don't actually just have Tourette's.
Well, let me explain why Russ is just spouting out fucks and screwings all over the place. Episode 6, we had a lot of swearing in. Just a little observation.
All right.
We swear a lot in
Good to
episode
know.
6.
Clean it up.
We need to clean this shit up. So the thing is like, if you have the friendship relationship, you help them. If you have the rival, you hurt them. And if you're screwing them, you can do either, right? And so what you're saying is it would be a lot more powerful. It's a lot more powerful and salient because when you do the thing, when you either help or hurt, it definitively works.
Yeah, you say, I am screwing your eye.
Right, yeah.
I am helping
You're not
you.
just like
maybe I help you?
maybe I help you. Yeah, you're right. Okay. That's interesting.
And also, just the wider range makes it so you are almost never safe. You almost never have the best roll you can get, right? There's one card in the deck that beats the rest of them, but
I think also like having your cards in front of you kind of adds to the tension. So like if you have a low card, you're just kind of like, oh shit, am I gonna die? Am I gonna die?
Yeah. You can feel it, because you don't know what the killer's got, and your whole that's a good point.
And you watch the cards like bleed out of your hand, right? Yeah,
that's a good point.
Coming down to it.
Pretty good. Okay, so well, I like that. Yeah, but what you were saying, Dan, you're right. Like. Even if the killer was rolling a D20 and you were rolling a D6 or a D10, you still got a decent chance of surviving on that, right? Like you could, the odds are against you, but even on a D6, your odds are still like 1 in 3 or so, right? Or roughly,
Or I mean, if you're rolling a die, if somebody else, like if you roll the highest result on your die, nobody else could come in and make things worse for you, right?
Right.
But somebody else could always have a higher card than you.
You're right. Exactly. Yeah. That's where the like range of outcomes comes in. That's pretty good. I like that. Okay.
And elimination of ties.
Okay. That's good. All right. Elimination of ties. Why is that important?
So especially in something
why is that a goal? I guess
in something that's like explicitly PvP, right? It's best to just not have ties to begin with. I think because then you have to have some like convoluted way of dealing with it, right? And, I mean, I guess you could just roll off again or whatever, but I don't know. Yeah. I think it's much more. It's much better to just like quickly deal with it, right? Like there are no ties in this system if you're using cards.
Digression. Can we talk about how awesome going back to Mountain Witch's tie thing is? It's really, really good.
Iuchi or
the Iuchi, because when it's dice. So this is I'm going back to being the dice advocate. It's dice. You roll the dice, and when you have a tie, but what they do, what Mountain Witch does, which is really neat, listeners, you'll love it, is if you roll a tie, technically neither of you have won, and in fact you can choose to say, oh well, nothing, we just clash swords for a little bit but nothing happens, right? That's boring though. Instead you can do Iuchi, and when you do Iuchi as the player, you can choose to have whatever level of success you want, but you have to give a matching level of success to the opposition, and so it's a total risk reward. It's like how much do I want to how much do I really want to win this? How much do I want to sacrifice? It's pretty good. It's a cool thing, but sorry, digression. But in general, ties are not good in games. I agree.
Right.
except for the incredible exception of the Mountain Witch. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Ties are awesome.
Which ties are really cool.
Other than that game that solved it 10 years ago. Right.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Okay. So in the PvP context, especially, you're right. Even honestly, even in any context, I mean, because you have to have some way of solving the tie, which is like annoying, right?
Right.
And then or if your game is bad, the rules just say, oh, nothing happens, roll again, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think there are certain games where they like tell you to set the stakes so that they cannot. So it's not necessarily mutually exclusive.
Oh, that's
so
true.
Both people can still succeed.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's a very specialized case
and subtle too, right? That can be kind of a subtle thing to pull off,
right?
In a satisfying way, for sure. Okay, cool. Well, so what might some other goals of like?
Well, my example, I had a bunch of playing cards from attempting to play Savage Worlds, and so I wanted to use those playing cards, and so I looked for games that use the playing cards, and then here we are.
Well, that was your goal as a player for why you might.
Okay, I see.
What might a game designer's goal be? Okay, let's talk about Savage Worlds. Are you guys familiar with it much?
I'm not.
I've read the rules. I've never played it.
I played it just once, but it was okay. It was not really my thing, but it did do a thing that I thought was interesting. It was an initiative thing. It's the only game I've ever played where the initiative is actually like fun to do.
Yeah.
Because you do like this little, it's playing cards. You do playing cards for the initiative, and it's got this like little sort of like mini game that you do with the playing cards to determine initiative. I'm not sure what the game designers were trying to accomplish with that because it doesn't mean shit in the fiction.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to make initiative fun instead of like a chore.
Yeah. And they did a good job because it actually is kind of a fun thing.
Yeah.
But I would argue that you don't even need this concept of turn order at all.
Solve the initiative problem. It just like it covers it up a little bit. Yeah. Well, okay. So if you guys don't know much about it, and I've only played it once, it doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about it, I guess. But here we go.
Well, strap in.
The designer's goal was, like you said, was clearly to make initiative a fun thing, and he thought, "Gosh, I don't think dice are up to the challenge here. So I'm going to go with something that offers me a wider range of outcomes and flexible goals or flexibility. So I'm going to go with cards." Okay. I got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean, what other goals?
Well, and so I think that, Russ kind of brought up a point too about like in Final Girl, you have like your hand of cards that are all your resources that you have for that whole like round.
Right.
And so, it kind of gives you a sense of like, you know what you have left at all times, which you wouldn't with die unless with like, I guess you could take a bunch of dice and like roll them all.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Because even with that dice pools, like you don't know what that individual dice represents.
Is going to do, like,
right.
Yeah.
Possibility.
Yeah, you still have there's a randomness still. Yeah.
Well, and I have played, in my explorations of games using cards, like, for example, there's one called Lady Killers where it has like an inbuilt mechanic that uses the cards. So like when you do a conflict, you have 2 cards that you play. If you play 2 red cards, you succeed at your action. If you play at least 1 black card, you fail.
Okay.
But then there's also, the difference between the values in the cards represents how much damage your character takes.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a fairly built-in, there's other stuff that happens, but I mean, it's like very built in with the cards.
Yeah. It's hard to model with dice.
Yeah.
That's hard. You're right. I've never played Lady Killers, or the Lady Killers, but, that's interesting. Yeah. Cause it's like like you said, Dan, like I guess the cards, just this one simple tool is giving you like all these different gameplay options, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because there are colors and there are suits and that's interesting. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Cool. So it's not even just a numerical range of outcomes. It's like
all the extra parts,
all the little extra moving parts of a card. Yeah. Cool.
Well, cause there's other games I played. I think you played God King. I don't know if you remember it all, but, I remember everybody kind of had the same reaction playing that game where like, why are we using cards? Like, you have cards, all that matters is if you get enough red cards or enough black cards. So like, the values don't, like, to some, for the most part, the cards don't actually matter.
Right.
So like at that point, why are you using cards? Like, why not just use dice?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Like
if you don't consciously make an effort to like
incorporate the tool,
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, why are you doing it? Yeah. Otherwise it just looks like a gimmick or something, right? Yeah. So one of the things that I think, is really interesting when, game designers set it as a goal, and execute it is when they want the mechanics to actually directly tie into the theme of the game.
To support the theme. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so the classic example is Dread, right? I mean, that's the one that, it's the easy one to go to. I don't know how
I think it's really funny that people bring that up as the easy example, but I don't understand how playing Jenga actually, like, it hits the right notes, like, emotionally, I guess, but...
Yeah, I was about to say that I don't know if it, like, succeeds. I think Dread's a little long in the tooth, and it kind of could use a refresh, but, for lots of reasons. But the idea, I think, behind... So, for the listeners, if you don't know, Dread is this, game from about, 15 years ago or so, whereby it's a horror game, and, conflict resolution is done, via pulls from a Jenga tower. And, so if your character's really good at something, they might not have to pull from the Jenga tower at all.
And difficulty is like how many pulls.
Yeah,
you make,
yeah.
Right?
So so if it's something like your character might not be good at doing, they might have to pull multiple times, right? But the idea is once the tower collapses, your character's out of the game, usually dead, right? So, I think the idea, Dan, is that the Jenga tower is supposed to simulate like the suspense of like a horror movie or like a scary situation, right? A tense situation. And so when I say that's the classic example, I mean like that's just what people always refer to.
Right. Yeah.
When they talk about like games that like the mechanics are trying to like replicate the theme or like, or tie directly into the theme. That's a great one. Dust Devils is another one, right? Yeah. Dust Devils is the one where you do conflict resolution via poker hands. You play poker. Again, I'm not totally sure how successful that is. I had some issues with it when we played it, but what do you guys think about that? Like when does that just become a gimmick? I guess is what I'm getting at. Like it's really cool in theory, like this idea of like, I'm going to make my mechanics like really closely tied to the theme of the game, but they've got to really nail that, right? Or it's just going to come off as really stupid, right?
And I think that if you're not doing something that could be more easily done with dice or a pack of cards or any other standard thing, then, I don't know. I'm going to get annoyed at it when I'm playing it, for sure.
But the funny thing is I'm having a hard time thinking of a game that like has clearly tried to do this, but where it comes off as more of a gimmick and not, and it was not successful. Even the games where like, even like Dust Devils and Dread, which I think are games that have a lot of issues, in their mechanics, even those are pretty commendable attempts at the goal of like making your mechanics tie to the fiction or the theme of the game. Can you think of one that didn't knock it out of the park, Dan?
A game with haikus or something?
Is there a game that has haiku, possibly?
No, I can't think of any, because that's not
question
really
in the form of a haiku.
Really conflict resolution.
Is there a game involving haiku that you foisted on us one time, Dan? Is there possibly a game like that we could discuss?
This is not actually a podcast. This is actually an intervention.
Tell us about this one.
I think the game you're fishing for is...
I think I was fishing for it.
Gently.
Yeah, gently. A subtle prod.
Right. I think the game you're fishing for is Warrior Poet, I'm guessing.
Oh, I think that's the one, yeah.
So
what's that one about?
So the idea of that is it's actually like probably my favorite game that I'll never play again. So like it's my favorite idea, like my favorite platonic idea of like the perfect game is kind of Warrior Poet.
Right. Yeah.
So you are like Japanese swords people, anime style, like beautiful Japanese warriors who do beautiful Japanese fighting.
Very large Japanese breasticles.
No, you've been watching too much anime.
Okay. Yeah, less that.
I need to barf that part.
You need to barf that anime out. Oh, now that we've called back to it, he has to leave it in, right?
Yeah, true.
Shit.
Yeah.
So
hoisted my own petard.
Anyway, it's kind of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon style,
right?
Where you're like running across the tops of bamboo forests and stuff like this, and like running across water and leaping into the air and like swords flashing in the moonlight. And all this.
Sounds cool.
It sounds amazing. And so,
it does.
So what would possibly make that more amazing? Writing haikus about the combat that you're doing.
I could have sworn you said that would make it amazing.
Right. So, like whenever there's a conflict, each player starts writing a haiku, and then one of the other players judges whose haiku line was best, and they get awarded with like an extra die or two to add to their final roll. Amazing. I love everything about it, except that it takes like fucking forever to accomplish anything because you're spending your whole night writing haikus instead of actually playing the game.
We did a combat that lasted, I swear to God, the combat lasted an hour. Like, I was like,
contrary to popular belief, haikus are not natural speaking patterns.
Well, it's that game. I'm right there with you, Dan. When you first like dumped that one on us, I was like, oh well. This will be a little lark, but then you started to like, and then I started to fall into your miasma of like hope and possibility on this game. Like, oh yeah, this is going to be great. Yeah, I'm loving this. Like, this is good. The more I think about it, wow, this is really avant-garde and cool. I'm really excited about this. Holy shit, that game was terrible. Like, it was just a crash in every way. Sorry, Grant Howitt. Grant Howitt, I love Goblin Quest. I love Havoc Brigade. And I'm really, really excited about Explosions, the RPG. But boy, and even one last job. Warrior Poet, oh man. Just, oh man. We couldn't even make it through the whole session. We quit. Like, we quit like halfway through.
Wow, that's pretty uncommon.
Yeah, super uncommon. Yeah. Jeez. We just couldn't hang with it.
But honestly, like, My problem with it was less the haiku. Well, okay, it was the haikus.
It was totally the haikus.
It was the haikus, but
there were two.
When it all came down to it, the haikus were just giving you bonuses to like extra dice to roll at the end. So you could write like the fucking best haiku in the world and still lose.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, so and when you were even suggesting earlier before we started recording that like the haiku that doesn't even count as a conflict resolution system.
No, it's not.
I think it does. I think it does.
It's just bonuses. So
right, yeah. Well,
you could strip that out and still play the game.
Right. Yeah. It would probably be a lot better actually because the character setup in that game is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really neat character creation process. But yeah. Anyway, Warrior Poet. Well, so that's a game like that doesn't nail it. I think there are games that do nail it though. Really well. And I'm going to pull up my list right now, so I can find one.
No. Well, I think Hell for Leather is really good. It doesn't have custom, components, but it does use the tarot cards.
Okay, yeah.
Which I think are integrated really well because it has kind of like a supernatural theme.
Right,
where you talked about it before, but in case anybody doesn't want to go listen to that episode.
We've never played it though. I've never played it.
That's right.
Yeah, Dan, I've never played it, so you should inform us about this.
Yeah, so basically, you can skin it differently, but the way it's in the book is most people are part of a motorcycle gang. They killed their leader, who is offered a deal to come back and get vengeance.
Right.
And so they use the tarot cards for that. Like certain characters are represented by tarot cards.
Okay.
And that is kind of like how you choose your character. And then you use the artwork on the card, to kind of like guide your thinking and like interpretation of the character.
Okay.
And then like conflict resolution, you draw a tarot card.
Right.
And based on what the card is, that's whoever's narrating uses that and then like narrates from that point.
So, well, as you've described it, then, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good example of like a game where they've used the conflict resolution mechanic or the central mechanic as also tying directly into the theme. If we think of like these characters having like a destiny, a sort of supernatural destiny, I think the tarot even has like a devil card in it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a game about the devil. Yeah.
The writer?
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. I like that. I think it's a good solid example. I have not played it yet, but, the Jank, folks, they're making that game Time Cellist.
Right.
I have not played this game, but it's a game where you play, little kids, who are having like a time travel adventure. And I gather it involves like Bach and Yo-Yo Ma or something. I'm not sure all the details are. It's called Time Cellist. So I think Yo-Yo Ma's in there somewhere. But it's basically kids having this time travel adventure. And because they're kids, to sort of like tie into this like theme of childhood adventure and childhood play, all of the conflict resolution mechanics are playground games. So you do rock, paper, scissors, you do, there's another one, I can't remember.
Like Hot Hands or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And, so that's kind of cool. Like I haven't played that, and it seems like that could be fun. Like, and that's like, if your goal is to like hammer home the idea that this is a game about like kids, doing kid things, or kids being kids, like that's a pretty neat way of kind of hitting that.
I still think they should just have cello-based resolution mechanics where you have to play cello.
You must play cello.
Duel.
You must play cello. Yeah. Well, so, I mean, what else do we want to say about this topic? I mean, is there anything else we want to hit?
I think that one of the other things that we haven't talked about is that there are plenty of games that just remove randomness entirely.
Oh, sure. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, and I think that there's maybe two reasons why they do it. So I think the main reason is that, it just gives you a much tighter control over the story. So,
yeah.
And I think you see this probably a lot more in GM-less games where everyone's like, where it is a much more cooperative thing.
Yeah,
where we're going on this story journey and we can like all hold hands around a campfire and tell this story.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And, so things like Fiasco, right, where it's sort of just decided by consensus at the table how conflicts go. Yeah. And, even Witch does the same thing, theoretically.
Oh. So what's I thought we decided it doesn't have conflict resolution.
Well, it doesn't, but it's you guys decide at the table. There's no in-game mechanical way
whether or not that was like
resolve conflicts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Fiasco is the better case because it actually has a like, you actually, like at the end of your scene, there is a yes, do I succeed or no, do I fail? and the group does decide it, but it's not random. Like it's a decision that's made by the group, right? Uses dice, incidentally, but
it uses dice in a very loose definition of the word.
Yeah. It uses the color, but for the setup, it uses the number too, kind of like using different parts of the playing card. But
but that's not conflict resolution.
That's true. Fair enough. Right. Let's get back on topic.
Stay on topic.
For sure. You've listed in the notes Ribbon Drive. Ribbon Drive's the road trip game. I can't remember what the conflict resolution mechanic in that is.
So if a conflict comes up in Ribbon Drive, everyone gets quiet for a second and listens to the song that's currently playing on the radio and interprets the lyrics in a way that will resolve the conflict.
Oh, so in that way,
the tone of the song or the lyrics of the song or something, like whatever is happening in the music informs how the conflict actually is resolved.
And there's another great example of the designer using that tool to pull in the theme too, right?
So I think that's a really good example of it.
Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, it's a cool thing. It's something that I wish more game designers did, because I think that, like, man, if you can nail that, people are going to talk about your game, right? Like that's like a cool aspect of the game, right? Like even Dread, for all of its problems, is so famous for that Jenga tower thing, right?
That's true.
I mean, like it's so famous for it. It was as famous as a role-playing game could be anyway, right? Or an independent role-playing game. But everyone knows Dread, even if you've never played it, you know, kind of like it's what the deal is, about the Jenga tower and it's intriguing. I wish more games did this. Like, I would like to see more of that in games where, like, you've got this really, really cool, like, mechanic that emphasizes the theme. Hey, you know what? Dog eat dog.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to say dog eat dog because in Dog Eat Dog, that's the game about, like, where one player is the colonizer and the rest of them are, like, colonized, right? Its central conflict resolution mechanic is that you can't win, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like the colonizer.
It has dice in there just so you can feel like there's a chance when you don't know any better.
Like there are dice being used, that's true. But in fact, what's really going on is that the colonizer player can just ignore your roll and say, nope, you actually fail. Sorry. Right. And that ties super closely to this idea of you are a colonized people who have no power, right?
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. And that's what I mean, I think. Like, I would love I love it when a game, like, even if they are using dice or whatever, like it's kind of a shallow premise for the conversation, honestly, to say like, oh, let's just ditch dice and, see what you can do cool things with dice too. Right.
Yeah.
Like, but like just the idea of like, thinking about like how you can have your mechanics, like really tie into the theme of your game. I just think it's really cool. I love it when a game does that.
I think that's really good because, you've talked on the other episodes about how damaging it is to a game to be ripped out of the fiction by like the mechanics. And so,
that's true. That's a really good point. Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And I think that's where Dust Devils and Dogs in the Vineyard go astray, right?
Yeah.
They have that cool like poker-esque mechanic, right? But
it's too involved.
It's too involved. Yeah. Like in both cases too. One uses dice, the other just uses actual poker hands. Yeah. But the idea is the same. Like,
right. At this point, we might as well just like break out the maps and get our minis out. And start playing
it's
our
so involved.
Game.
Like the Dogs in the Vineyard one. It's fun. It's a fun process. But by the time you get done, I never even remember what's going on in the story.
Yeah, because it's like so long.
Yeah, no, like that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What were we doing again? I don't remember.
We were burning heretics or something.
We were dragging. What were we doing? Dragging people in the streets. I don't remember. Killing them. I don't know. Sinners. I don't know. Devils. Yeah. Well, so, okay. Was there anything else we want to add in this topic? I think we've kind of, it's a fast topic.
We covered it.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll move on to our, listener feedback section after the break. So our next, segment is, what do we call this segment? Listener feedback, letters from the listeners.
How about email?
Email from listeners, except that they're not always emails. Yeah, it's kind of hard. Listener feedback.
Like rabble rousing.
Yeah.
From the rabble.
Well, okay, so we've been getting a lot of really, really terrific feedback, like I said, from listeners, and a number of you have actually written really thoughtful emails and messages, kind of trying to keep the conversation going and kind of engaging on different topics, and I love that. So I wanted to go through a couple of them that we received and see what you guys had to, what you guys think about some of these points that are brought up. So listener Steven writes in, and by writes in, I mean he posted a series of posts on G+. But one of the things that he posted that I thought was really good was, and I think he's referring to our discussion at the end of episode 2 when we discussed experience points in Dungeon World, right? That conversation that I feel like we always have and continue to have,
nauseam.
Right. No matter what the topic.
Yeah, just without any sort of progress or resolution.
Right, yeah. So he says, I'm curious about XP in the Dungeon World game. XP is given for failure, but leveling after a number of XP causes stat increases. Or I think he means to say when you level up, you get stat increases.
As part of it.
Yeah. This will make failure less likely. I think my trad players, my traditional players, would miss the regular level advancement at higher levels. So I gathered from his comments that he hasn't actually that he's just kind of he's guessing. I don't think he's actually playing.
He's like considering.
Yeah. I think he's considering playing Dungeon World, and one of the things he brings up is like, okay, so this idea of as your characters get better, they're not going to fail as often, and so they're not going to get XP as much, and the leveling will slow down. I have some thoughts on that, but before I launch into it, do either of you guys have any thoughts on it?
Well, so I think my first thought when I read that was that I thought that traditional games, the leveling slowed down pretty bad at the end too.
I thought so too, but I could be wrong about that. It could depend on what.
I mean, I guess it depends on your GM or whatever.
Yeah.
But it always felt like, the initial ramp was real fast and you were getting a level like every session. And then it got to the point where like it was every other session and it stretched out longer and longer.
I'm thinking back on my second ed days and I don't, in second ed, I want to say that level progression still happened pretty, regularly at regular intervals because the monsters just got harder and the XP values of the monsters went up, right? But one thing that I think that, if you like advancement, Dungeon World still advances, the characters advance faster just overall, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember like it'd take you a few sessions to get from level, 2 to 3 or whatever, right? Yeah. Or by the time you finally got the sweet fireball and lightning bolt, right? Like
before how much stuff you're hacking up on the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think, anyway, my answer to the question is essentially, in play, this is a really great example of theoretical problems versus actual problems at the table.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't think it's an issue. We haven't, I think, to be fair, like we've played lots of Dungeon World, but we've only ever had like characters get to level 8 or 9 before we retire the campaign, right?
Right.
But that's still pretty high level, right? Like once you start hitting like, 5 or 6 or so, it's only a 10 level game, by the way, like 10's as high as you can go. In play, like at the table over multiple sessions, I've never had a single person say, I feel like I'm slowing down on level progression.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I just don't think it's an issue.
Well, I think too, just because you have bonuses to some of your stats, that doesn't mean like you always use that stat.
Yeah.
Like as the GM, like you're kind of pushing people, kind of like, bringing up something from the Grim World where we popped out of the tunnel. And so like I had a strength-based character.
Right.
But like the way it was framed, I couldn't, just like, I'm going to run at him. It's like, no, I have to react to what's happening.
Yeah.
So
in the fiction.
Like a dex
or a charisma thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I think in general, Dungeon World's better about, spreading out what you're rolling off of. Whereas you can get by in D&D just rolling, like, just piling on strength and dex or whatever. And you can go a long way with that.
Yeah. That's true.
And never have to roll other stats, right?
That's true.
In Dungeon World, that
they all
doesn't
get
really
used.
work. You use all of them.
Yeah, that's actually actually, honestly, when it comes to trad players and their reactions to Dungeon World, that's the number one reaction, which is they all make charisma their dump stat. Yep. Every one of them. Every trad player who has ever played Dungeon World with me, they dump stat charisma, and then it comes back to bite them in the ass, like in a big way, because in Dungeon World there are no dump stats. I mean, you got to choose one, right? But I always make, the way I run Dungeon World, I always make like any kind of item or custom move that involves like appealing to a god and therefore has big consequences. I always make that a charisma roll, right? And so they find themselves in a situation where their charisma is their dump stat and they've got to like pray at this altar to get this god's favor.
Hopefully not being smitten.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're going to get smoted, if they blow it. No, I think that's actually the bigger issue, honestly, when trad players first run into Dungeon World is they're like, oh crap, I roll wisdom constantly, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
All of a sudden, like you can't discern realities for shit.
And
you
just
die.
Like, put the blinders on.
Yeah.
I don't care anything about what's happening.
I'm not looking at anything. I am not trying to figure out what this means.
Swing my sword, run ahead.
I care nothing for your reality.
I care to discern them. But back to Steven's, a very good point. I mean, but I just think it's a bit of a theoretical point, which is one thing that Dungeon World does, now this is not in the rules and but something that happens sort of naturally, I've noticed, a natural sort of thing that occurs is once like levels start to get a little higher, I don't think players are doing it because the failure XP has slowed down a little. But I think what they end up doing just sort of naturally is they start hitting the end of session XP awards a little harder, right? So they're looking at their alignment to make sure they can get that one. Yeah. They're looking at their bonds to try to make that work, but bonds are horrible.
However that's supposed to happen.
However the fuck that's supposed to go. but they're trying, right? And then also the like sort of like group world question, you know, things like.
And naturally, like your campaign is getting to a point where you're discovering more important things and fighting more like memorable monsters and all that. So you're getting there
treasure.
more often.
Yeah. So you're getting those end of session XP awards. And I think that's why people don't notice the slowdown on the other end because you're still getting your XP, right? You're just kind of getting it in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And even just like the failure XP, I guess, you know, I think part of the reason why it doesn't get noticed so much is because the changes are actually kind of subtle, to be honest. Like you don't get a stat modifier boost every time you level, right?
Yeah.
It only happens on average probably every, 2 or 3 levels, right?
Right.
And so there's not
in the majority of your stats you have to invest several points in to get the plus.
To get the plus,
bonus,
to make it go from +1 to +2 or whatever, right? So it's actually kind of a problem that almost doesn't even exist. I mean, it does, or it's not even a problem, but it's a thing that happens, but it's a little bit more subtle.
It's not as prominent as it seems like it would.
Yeah, like it would be. Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that I think that...
And you only need 1 extra XP per level, right?
Right,
so the ramp isn't huge.
Yeah. Another thing, I think that is worth pointing out about why it ends up not being much of an issue at the table is, in fact, players aren't really chasing XP in Dungeon World, right? Everyone wants to advance and everyone wants to level, but man, it comes with a big penalty, right? Like getting that XP point comes with a big penalty. Like it's never good for your character, right? They're definitely learning their lesson, right? It's a school of hard knocks in Dungeon World. So it's not like people are like, oh man, I didn't get enough, at least in my games. It's not like, oh, I didn't get enough XP today, but they're just happy they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish.
You can almost see people like hurt inside a little bit when they get a lot of XP because they're like, wow, my character got beat up all game.
Yeah, I know. My character just sucked and they just suffered so many consequences and a lot of times they die too, right? Like at a certain point, like I kind of play it to where like, once you've made like several failed rolls in succession on the same like sort of like scene or whatever, you're really pushing towards death, right? Like there's bad things are happening, right? So I think just the fact that like most players don't want to fail rolls kind of obviates like this thinking at the table of like, I'm not getting enough XP as we go. I think it's just not even a consideration. So I don't know.
Well, and I think also too in Dungeon World, since you start off as like a capable adventurer, there's not as much necessity to like, I have to get, level up so that I'm not in danger of being killed immediately
honestly,
by a rat.
That's a better point, actually. You're right. That's something that Listener Steve may not be aware of if he hasn't played Dungeon World yet, which is the characters are super competent at the beginning, right? Yeah. A level 1 Dungeon World character is the equivalent of like a level 10 any other game character, right? Right. And for sure. And honestly.
And a level 10 Dungeon World character isn't that much better than a level 1 Dungeon World character.
Even they have some more color stuff they can do.
Yeah. Right. You've got like more like kind of cool options, but your character's not necessarily better, right? Right. It's definitely much more, even though it's called level 1, level 2, level 3, it's definitely more of like a lateral expansion. It's like, I just have like more cool things I can do. I can still get my ass kicked by this level 1 guy if it came down to it, right? So that's a thing that Dungeon World, just an aspect of Dungeon World that again, like kind of obviates this idea that like you're going to notice like the XP slowdown. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I thought it was a good explanation for his question. He had a lot of great questions and a lot of good like insight and some things we said, but that was one that I wanted to touch on. So thank you, listener Steve, for that. So we also got an email from a gentleman, listener. This is listener Mark. This is actually the friend in Corpus Christi that co-host Steve talked about on the last podcast. He wrote back with some things that he wanted to point out, and he mentioned that he had like I guess his email kind of made it sound like it was really easy to like just throw your meat up and you'll have to put your meat up out there and you're gonna get a ton of people. So he says well, 90% of my players I got from Reddit and 9% from the meetup and 1% word of mouth. He said he had about 10 to 15 players over the last 2 years, but I've had several people move away or go off to school and so forth. After a year of little contact and countless emails asking me if my group would run Pathfinder or Dungeons & Dragons, I pulled my meetup page down. Corpus Christi is a gaming wasteland, not just a gaming wasteland. Sorry. That's me throwing that in there. Corpus is a gaming wasteland. Any advice on how to get my meetup presence up? You know what? There may not be a way, right? there just may not be a way. I mean, Corpus Christi just may not be the right, like demographics of, you just may not have the right like player base. It just may not be the right community for it. Right?
And I think there's probably a lot of people in that situation. Like we kind of take it for granted because we're in like the 4th largest city in the country.
Yeah, I know.
So
I know.
It's real easy for us to say like, just put a web page up and people flock to your games.
People flock to your games. Yeah.
Right.
It's not that easy. But one thing you could do, we have a lot of community members who are not able to join us, for live games. And so, they always try to get like Hangouts games going. Yeah. Games over Google Hangouts work pretty well, actually. It's not as good as being in person, in my opinion. But it has a lot to recommend it. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to leave your house.
Right.
You don't have to go anywhere. You can find players from anywhere, right? Like you can, as long as it's really, at that point, it becomes less about who are the people I can convince to play with me, in my community or whatever, and more about like, what game can I run that will cause people to want to sign up for my hangout?
When you can have like more targeted, like I want people that would want to play this kind of game.
This particular game.
Advertise this G Plus.
Absolutely. And
whatever.
There's so many G Plus communities for specific games.
Right.
That you can go there to find players. If there's like a game
and
that you
do a
want to play
Hangouts
and you're
thing.
willing to do Hangouts.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not answering the question, but, or it is answering the question, but not in a satisfying way, I guess. I mean, if your player base is just not there may not be much you can do.
Yeah.
Go out and get a player base online on the internet.
Yeah.
Play online. So, yeah. And I suspect, like, that's what a lot of us, if we ever leave Houston for whatever reason, that's probably what we'll have to do, right?
Yeah.
We'll probably have to do that. So, listener Mark also had another part of his email that was not related, but I thought was very interesting. So we talked about Fate, right?
Right.
A lot. And he runs Fate, and he says, I find Fate is a good, quote, bridge game, for the more traditional players. It's got enough of that boring D&D crunch. Those are his words. Those are listener Mark's words, not Jason's words.
Right. The Fate advocate.
Yes. It's got enough of that boring D&D crunch that they like, and then it has this crazy new idea about aspects and cooperative narrative that takes them some time to settle into. And he says, and yes, dear God, I hate having to juggle 40 goddamn aspects at any given time. So do I, listener Mark. I think Fate has been the training wheels these players needed to take on more abstract narrative games like Fiasco or Dungeon World. What are your thoughts on this? Because I don't think I agree.
So, I don't know
with the premise of what he's saying.
See, I don't know that I agree necessarily either. Like, part of me wants to say that, like, I don't know, just jump straight to something better. But
that's what my part of me wants to say.
Yeah, I figured that's kind of what your side of this was going to be. But that said, the first game I ever got going that wasn't D&D or Pathfinder was Spirit of the Century,
right?
So there's something there. And whether, I mean, you could argue, I guess, that it's just like because it is one of the more popular, like, indie sort of RPGs, one of the more popular RPGs that is not actually D&D or Pathfinder.
Right.
But there's a reason. There's got to be a reason that it is. I mean, it's not popular just because. So there's obviously something there that appeals to people. If there's something appealing about Fate that'll let people, like, try different RPGs, because there's so much, like, this entrenched idea of, like, D&D is RPGs.
Right, yeah.
And so at least if it's kind of chipping away at that, then I love it for it. So.
Yeah, sort of cosmically. Yeah, I guess that's a great reason to love Fate. I don't know. Like, I haven't played it much. So I don't really have a lot of, like, experience with Fate, and, but they've all been subpar. Like, so far, like, except for I played Spirit of the Century once, and that was kind of fun. But I don't know. To my mind, I think the Apocalypse World games are dead easy. I really do. And they have a lot of the things that I think, that, like, can kind of lure a trad player in, right? Or at least, like, they've got character classes, most of them, the PBTA games, that is. They've got levels, they've got advancements, they've got, like, they don't really work like exception based moves in Pathfinder or whatever, but they do have, like, moves, right? That, they're more like narrative, sparks or whatever, and the core mechanic is so much more simple and elegant than Fate. I just feel like that Fate preceded Apocalypse World, but I think Apocalypse World has solved the argument, and to me, like, to my mind.
I agree. I feel like with Apocalypse World, there's kind of like one central idea you have to kind of, like, get into your head and adjust to. Right. Whereas, like, with Fate, I mean, I haven't played a lot of Fate either, but just reading the rulebook, I can never make it through the rulebook, because at just some point I'm just like, what what the hell is this? Like, it just doesn't, connect with me in any way.
But as a player, you don't have to. It's on the GM to make sense of the rule book.
Okay.
And it's much more in the traditional
style, right? Yeah,
where,
of like, I deliver fun to you.
The GM has read the rule book, so it doesn't matter if you can make it through it or not.
Right.
As long as the GM can get through it and
bring everybody along.
Right, and like it's not that hard to play a Fate character. It's hard as shit to run a Fate game, but like playing a character in Fate isn't that hard.
Yeah.
And so, whereas I think it is hard to play a good character in an Apocalypse World game. Right?
Is it?
I think it is to some degree. I think it's more on you to like bring things to the story than in something like Fate, where it's like your responsibility ends when you write interesting aspects that the GM can compel.
I don't totally agree. I mean, I see where you're coming from, but I don't know if I agree with that, because to my mind, I'm of the opinion that like once you grok the core 2d6 plus modifier mechanic with the 3 layers of outcomes, right? The 3 layers of narrative outcomes. I feel like once you've mastered that, at that point, you've essentially like learned everything you need to know about Apocalypse World games, right? And the rest of it is like just a skill, right? But in terms of like the learning part of it, you've kind of learned it all at that point, to my mind. But so there's something to be said about just like that basic sort of core simplicity. But you
just said the rest of it is skill.
Well, I know that's what you were getting at. But let me keep going.
Okay.
I know that's what you're getting at is because you said that like it was like that playing Apocalypse World was harder. I think it's easy, but you can get better at it.
Okay.
You see, that's what I'm saying, right? Yeah, like I think it's easy to do, but you can get better, right?
Right.
I mean, we have some players who are in the Gauntlet who are not so great at narrative focused games, right?
Right.
But they still manage to do pretty okay in Apocalypse World games, right? Because they understand like the idea of like, I've got this move written on the paper. The move says a certain thing. It's got like, there's a lot of fiction tied up in that move, and I've just got to do that thing.
Right.
I do that thing on the paper and I get to roll my dice, right? I do that in the fiction. And so in a lot of ways, like, the moves are kind of like holding your hand in some way. And even the basic moves that are applicable to all the characters, they very much like inform like how you're supposed to play the game, to my mind. And so I think that's easier to get into, but you can get better at it. That's true.
Yeah.
So that's
and I think I think that maybe
see how I judoed that back on you,
right?
Like
yeah,
that's pretty good.
So I would say that maybe
should be a lawyer or something.
I should be a lawyer or something. I don't know. Yeah.
So maybe if you're running the game or something, if you have a GM who really gets Apocalypse World games, then maybe, but I think it would be easier for for like a table of traditional role players for the GM to pick up a Fate book and run an effective Fate game.
Yeah, I could see that.
Than it would be for them to just pick up Apocalypse World and be like, next week we're going to do this, guys.
Yeah, so. No, I can totally see that. Well, because I before I found Apocalypse World and Dungeon World, I'd been playing story games for a bit, and I had a hard time with Apocalypse World.
Right.
I mean, but that's because the book is very opaque, right? It's a very opaquely written book. It took me a while to figure it out, but once I did figure it out, it flowed pretty well.
Yeah. It's the difference of like teaching someone to swim by like throwing them in the deep end or giving them little floaties and sending them on their way.
Right. Yeah. So Fate, that's little floaties.
There you go.
Okay. Fate is little floaties. All right, cool. All right. Well, that was all we had for listener feedback. And that was also our podcast.
It was.
So if you would like to get in touch with us, you should definitely join our Google Plus community. That is a great place to come continue the conversation with us. If you send us a message that is really intriguing or engaging, we will talk about it on the podcast, like we've been doing. You can find us by going to the community section of Google Plus and searching for the Gauntlet. We will pop right up. So please do join us there. If you're going to be in Houston, you can find us on Meetup. If you want to go to our website, we have a podcast specific website, and it's amazing. It is
customized something.
It's beautifully customized, gorgeous animated art and stuff. And I've hidden little Easter eggs all over it. It's thriving and luxurious and wonderful. And it's at gauntletpodcast.libsyn.com. And we also have an email address, which is gauntletpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us, Russ.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.